She stepped out of the car quietly, without a driver or assistant, carrying only her handbag and a calm confidence. On the outside, no one could have guessed who she really was. She looked like an ordinary woman arriving for an appointment, blending easily into the busy street. There were no flashy clothes, no loud jewelry, and no expensive shoes shouting wealth and power. She preferred it that way. It was her style, simple, humble, but powerful in silence. What the world could not see was that this woman was a highly respected CEO, a leader who had built her success with determination, intelligence, and hard work. She walked toward the glass doors of the tall office building, her steps steady and graceful. She had been in countless offices before, from New York to London, and each time she carried the same quiet strength. But this visit was different. She wasn't here just for business. She was here to make a decision that could affect not only her company but also the future of the one she was visiting. The stakes were high, but she felt no fear. She trusted her instincts, and those instincts had never failed her. The morning sun reflected against the polished windows of the building, and she paused for a moment to take it all in. To anyone watching, she was just another visitor, another client. No one could tell that this woman controlled millions of dollars in investments, that she sat at the head of a major company, or that people in the industry respected her name. In fact, many feared losing her partnership because her choices could make or break businesses. But today, she walked with quiet humility, allowing others to underestimate her if they chose. She knew her worth. She did not need to prove it with appearances. As she entered through the glass doors, she noticed the lobby buzzing with activity. Employees rushed by with files, phones rang in the background, and the sound of heels clicked on the marble floor. She stood there for a second, letting the energy of the place wash over her. It was familiar, the busy rhythm of corporate life. But she also noticed something else. People were moving quickly, but without warmth. There were no smiles, no greetings, no small signs of kindness that usually filled a healthy workplace. It felt cold, mechanical, like everyone was only rushing for themselves. Still, she remained calm, her eyes scanning the space. She thought of how many times she had walked into buildings like this one, often underestimated because of her skin color, gender, or the way she chose to dress. She had learned long ago that some people judged quickly and harshly, without ever asking who you truly were. And she had also learned that moments like these often revealed a lot about character, hers and theirs. She tightened her grip on her handbag and walked toward the reception desk. She knew the next few minutes would be important, though she could not have guessed just how important. She carried no pride in her stride, but she carried a quiet dignity that no one could strip away. Every step was a reminder of the journey she had taken, the late nights building her business, the challenges she had faced as a black woman in corporate spaces, the countless times people had told her she couldn't succeed, and yet, here she was standing tall, ready to make decisions that could change the future of the very company she was visiting. There was a slight smile on her lips, not because she was amused, but because she understood the power of patience. Life had taught her that respect is not always given freely. It must sometimes be demanded, not with anger, but with success. She had learned that true strength comes not from shouting who you are, but from allowing others to realize it too. Late, the receptionist looked up briefly as she approached, but the CEO noticed the dismissive glance, the quick assumption. It was a familiar look, one she had seen many times before. But she said nothing. Instead, she kept her calm posture, prepared for whatever would come next. She knew that within a matter of minutes, everything about this company's future might change, and the receptionist, unknowingly, was about to play a major role in that story. What the receptionist did not know, and what the employees rushing around had no idea of, was that the woman standing before them carried the power to either lift their company higher or end its reputation in an instant. This was not just another visitor. This was someone whose decisions shaped entire industries. She wasn't there to seek approval. She was there to observe, to test, to decide. And in those first moments, before even a single word was exchanged, the story of respect, arrogance, and downfall was already beginning to write itself. She walked slowly toward the reception desk, the quiet hum of the lobby surrounding her. The marble floor reflected her steps, and the sound of her heels echoed faintly in the large open space. Behind the desk sat a young receptionist, scrolling on her phone with little interest in anything happening around her. The CEO stopped politely in front of the desk, waiting for the receptionist to acknowledge her presence. For a moment, it seemed the young woman didn't even notice her. When the receptionist finally looked up, her eyes narrowed slightly and her lips curved into the faintest sign of irritation. "Yes?" she asked, dragging out the word as though the woman in front of her was wasting her time. The CEO smiled warmly, her voice calm and respectful. "Good morning, I'm here for a meeting with the board." The receptionist raised an eyebrow, leaned back in her chair, and gave her a long, judgmental look. Then she chuckled under her breath and shook her head. "A meeting with the board? I don't think so. The board doesn't just meet with anyone who walks in." The CEO kept her composure, though inside she recognized the familiar sting of prejudice. She had heard this tone before, the tone of dismissal, the sound of someone who thought they knew her worth at a single glance. It wasn't just disbelief in her words. It was disbelief in her appearance. To the receptionist, she was simply a woman who didn't look like a CEO, didn't dress like wealth, and most importantly, didn't fit the image the receptionist had in mind. "I assure you," the CEO said gently, "I do have a scheduled meeting today." The receptionist sighed heavily, as though this interaction were an unbearable inconvenience. She tapped her nails on the desk, looked down at her phone again, and muttered, "Look, lady, I don't know who you think you are, but you can't just come in here and demand things. The board is busy. Maybe you're lost, or maybe you're in the wrong building." Then she leaned forward, her voice sharp now. "Honestly, you should just get lost before you embarrass yourself further." The words cut like a blade, not because they had power over the CEO, but because of how casually they were spoken, how easily the young woman dismissed someone she didn't understand. For a moment, silence hung between them. The CEO didn't raise her voice, she didn't argue. She only looked at the receptionist with calm, steady eyes. It was the look of someone who had been through worse, someone who had fought battles far greater than this, someone who didn't need to shout to prove her strength. She thought back to her younger days, when comments like these had left her doubting herself. There were times when she had gone home, questioning whether she belonged in the corporate world at all. But those days were long behind her. Now she saw the receptionist's words for what they were, a reflection of ignorance, not truth. The receptionist, mistaking her silence for weakness, smirked. She leaned back in her chair again, clearly satisfied that she had put the woman in her place. She didn't realize that in that very moment, she was not just disrespecting a visitor, she was disrespecting the very person whose decision could soon determine the fate of the entire company. The CEO tilted her head slightly, still calm. "Ah, you sure you don't want to check the list of appointments?" she asked softly, almost kindly, but the receptionist shook her head, her voice sharp. "I told you, you're not on it. You don't belong here. Now please leave before I have to call security." At that, the CEO finally gave a small nod. She did not argue further. She did not reveal her name. She simply turned slightly, as if considering her next step. But deep inside, she already knew the truth. This company had just failed a test it didn't even realize it was taking. The receptionist's words had revealed more about the culture of this workplace than any presentation or polished speech could. In those few minutes, she had seen it all: the arrogance, the lack of respect, the shallow judgment, and while the Receptionist believed she was protecting the board from unworthy visitors. She was actually sealing the fate of the very people she worked for. The CEO stood there a moment longer, watching the receptionist return to her phone as though nothing had happened. She noticed how no one else in the lobby seemed surprised. It was as if such dismissive behavior was normal here. That more than anything told her what kind of company this was. She breathed deeply, steady as ever, her mind already clear. The receptionist thought she had won, but in reality, the most powerful person in the building was about to walk into the boardroom and hold their future in her hands. And in just a matter of minutes, the same woman who had been told to get lost would turn the tables completely, leaving the entire company shaken, broken, and forced to face the cost of arrogance. As she stood in the lobby, just a few steps away from the receptionist's desk, the CEO felt a strange stillness in the air. The words "get lost" still lingered in her ears, but they didn't sting the way they once might have years ago. Instead, they revealed something bigger, something about the culture of the company she had come to visit. Prejudice, she thought, rarely introduces itself openly. It hides behind smiles, polite words, and carefully written policies. But sometimes, in moments like these, it slips through the cracks and shows itself in raw form. The receptionist hadn't just been rude. Her words carried the weight of judgment, the kind that looked at someone's skin color, clothing, or quiet presence and decided they weren't important enough. The CEO had lived her entire life navigating these silent walls. She knew what it felt like to walk into boardrooms where no one expected her to be the one in charge. She remembered the awkward glances, the whispered doubts, the moments when people asked if she was lost or in the wrong room, only to realize later she was the one leading the meeting. This encounter was nothing new, but it still spoke volumes. She took a slow look around the lobby. Employees moved past without offering a greeting, their faces serious, their eyes down. The energy of the place felt transactional, cold, and unwelcoming. It was the kind of environment where kindness seemed unnecessary, and respect was given only to those who looked powerful. It wasn't just the receptionist, it was a reflection of something deeper, something that started from the top and trickled all the way down. She realized that the receptionist's arrogance was not an isolated problem. It was likely a mirror of how leadership behaved behind closed doors. Culture always spreads from leaders to their teams. If the receptionist felt bold enough to dismiss someone so rudely without even checking the facts, it meant she had been shaped by a workplace where judgment and hierarchy mattered more than empathy and professionalism. The CEO's eyes softened, though her mind sharpened. She thought of how dangerous such a culture could be. Companies don't fail because of one rude employee. They fail because arrogance blinds them, because they stop valuing people, because they forget that respect is not optional, it is essential. And in those few minutes, she could already sense this company was infected with that very disease. The receptionist, meanwhile, had gone back to her phone, scrolling as if nothing significant had happened. She didn't even realize that her words had just written the opening line of a story that would soon shake the foundation of her employer's empire. The CEO thought of all the people she represented, the team she had built, the young leaders she mentored, the aspiring professionals who looked up to her. Every success she carried on her shoulders was also a victory for those who had been told, "You don't belong in offices like these." And here she was again, facing the same prejudice, not with anger this time, but with clarity. She remembered one of her earliest investors who once told her, "Business is not only about profit, it's about people. If a company doesn't know how to respect people, it will eventually destroy itself." Those words echoed in her heart now. The receptionist had just shown her that this company, despite its polished building and expensive suits, had forgotten the first rule of success. Respect costs nothing, but its absence can cost everything. As she stood there, calm and composed, She realized she was no longer merely waiting for a meeting. She was observing, collecting evidence, and seeing the truth of this company with her own eyes. What a boardroom presentation could never show her. A single careless receptionist had revealed in just a few minutes. The prejudice wasn't hidden anymore, it was alive, breathing, and shaping the way this company treated people. And as the CEO prepared to step into the next stage of her visit, she carried that truth with her like a weapon. It would soon be the reason she made a decision that would forever alter the destiny of the company that dared to underestimate her. She adjusted her handbag, stood taller, and gave one last glance toward the receptionist, not with anger, not with spite, but with the quiet certainty of someone who knew that, in a matter of minutes, the very words "get lost" would return like a storm, and this time, it wouldn't be directed at her, but at the company itself. She didn't walk straight into the boardroom after the receptionist's insult. Instead, she decided to linger. To anyone watching, it looked as though she was just waiting for someone to come escort her, but in reality, she was studying everything: the people, the atmosphere, the energy of the company. Years of experience had taught her that you could learn more about a business in its hallways than in its official reports. From her quiet spot near the lobby, she noticed the way employees interacted with each other. Some rushed past with phones pressed tightly to their ears, voices clipped and impatient. Others carried files and laptops, moving as if the weight on their shoulders was not just paper, but pressure. Not once did anyone pause to greet her, or even nod politely. They moved like robots programmed to keep moving forward. Blind to everything around them, she noticed a man in a sharp suit scolding a younger employee near the elevators. His voice was low, but his body language was clear, pointing fingers, shaking his head, making the younger one shrink a little smaller with every word. No encouragement, no teaching, no guidance, only blame. The younger employee's face told the rest of the story: frustration, fear, and the heavy silence of someone who had learned not to speak up. Reminded her of something she always believed. A company's health is written on the faces of its people. And here, those faces were tired, closed off, and unmotivated. There were no sparks of creativity, no joy, no collaboration. Only survival. As she looked closer, she began to feel the weight of the environment pressing down on her too. The air was heavy, not just from the buzz of work, but from something deeper, something cultural. It was the kind of atmosphere that told people they were easily replaceable, that their value depended only on their output, not their humanity. She had built her own company on very different values. In her offices, people greeted one another by name. Leaders knew the stories of their teams, not just their job titles. She had worked hard to make respect the foundation of her empire, because she knew that respect fed creativity, and creativity fueled growth. Watching this company now, she saw the opposite: a system where people feared mistakes, where kindness was weakness, and where power was measured by how harshly you could speak to someone below you. The receptionist was no exception. She was a product of this very culture. When she had told the CEO to get lost, she wasn't only speaking for herself, she was echoing the values that had been silently taught to her every day. If leadership had ever modeled respect, empathy, or professionalism, that receptionist would never have dared to speak the way she did. She had learned from the example above her, and that realization was powerful. The CEO shifted her eyes to the walls. The lobby was lined with framed photographs of the company's greatest achievements. Smiling executives cutting ribbons, shaking hands with partners, posing with trophies. But none of those pictures included ordinary employees. None of them showed diversity. None of them celebrated the people behind the scenes who had built the foundation of those achievements. The walls, like the culture, told a story of pride without gratitude. She took a seat in a chair near the lobby, crossing her legs calmly. She watched as another group of employees walked past, chatting among themselves. Their words were clipped, careful, as if every sentence was weighed before leaving their lips. It was the sound of people afraid to say the wrong thing. This company, she realized, was not driven by vision but by fear. Minutes passed, but she felt as though she had seen enough to understand everything. This wasn't just a workplace, it was a machine. A machine that crushed individuality and rewarded arrogance. A machine that had no room for warmth, diversity, or respect. A machine that was doomed to break down because no machine could run without the spirit of its people. And then it struck her. She didn't need to sit in a meeting to know the truth. This brief time in the lobby had told her more than any polished board presentation ever could. She now understood the essence of this company, and it was not good. Still, she remained silent, calm, and graceful. She wasn't here to lecture anyone. In the lobby, she wasn't here to defend herself against a receptionist's insult. She was here for something greater. She was here to decide if this company deserved her partnership, her resources, her trust. And with every passing minute, the answer was becoming painfully clear. She leaned back slightly, her eyes calm, her mind sharper than ever. In her silence, she was gathering not just impressions, but truths that would soon echo through the boardroom like thunder. And the irony was clear. While the receptionist and the employees rushed around her, dismissing her as just another visitor, she was already holding the power that would decide their future. What they didn't know was that this quiet observer was not just another woman in their lobby. She was the test they didn't know they were taking. And they were failing badly. The double doors of the boardroom opened with a soft click, and the atmosphere inside was instantly different from the lobby. The air was cooler, the lighting sharper, the furniture sleek and polished. Around the long wooden table sat men and women in expensive suits, their laptops open, their coffee cups steaming. They were mid-conversation, their voices low and confident, discussing numbers, deals, and future strategies. When the CEO entered, no one stood to greet her. Instead, the room went quiet for a moment, filled with puzzled looks. A few eyebrows rose, as if silently asking, "Who is this?" Some assumed she was an assistant, maybe someone who had walked into the wrong room. One man whispered something to the person beside him, and they both smirked, but before anyone could dismiss her out loud, a senior executive at the far end of the table spoke up nervously. "Ah, she's here," he said, his voice shifting into forced politeness. The smirks faded, the whispers died. The room suddenly remembered exactly who this woman was. The same woman the receptionist had mocked and told to get lost was not just another visitor, she was the very CEO they had been waiting for, the potential partner whose decision could bring millions into their company or take millions away. She was the one whose name had power in boardrooms across the country, the one whose respect they had been trying to earn for months. And now, she stood before them, calm, steady, and silent, letting the weight of their realization sink in. Some of the executives shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. A few forced smiles appeared, but it was too late. The initial reactions had already revealed everything: the lack of respect, the arrogance, the assumption that she didn't belong. The boardroom, much like the lobby, had failed its own silent test. The CEO took her seat slowly at the head of the table. She didn't need to rush. Power was already in her hands, and they knew it. The receptionist's insult was still fresh in her mind, but she didn't mention it yet. She didn't need to. The nervous glances being exchanged around the table told her that some of them were already aware of what had happened outside. Word had traveled fast, though no one dared to bring it up. "Shall we begin?" she asked softly, her voice calm yet commanding. The executives nodded quickly, their earlier confidence replaced by a cautious tension. They began their presentation, projecting slides filled with colorful charts, growth statistics, and promises of future success. Their words were polished, their tone professional, but the CEO listened with different ears. She wasn't just hearing numbers, She was hearing the voices of people who were desperate to impress her now, though just minutes earlier they hadn't. Even recognized her worth. As they spoke, she noticed their language, filled with pride, filled with self-praise. They talked about how powerful their brand was, how strong their influence was in the market, how essential they were to the industry. But nowhere in their words did she hear mention of people, the employees, the culture, the values that make a company truly thrive. It confirmed what she already knew. This was a company that measured success only in profits, not in principles. And such companies, no matter how large, always carried cracks in their foundation. Finally, one of the executives turned to her with a forced smile. "We'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you believe we can build a strong future together?" The room went quiet again, all eyes fixed on her. She let the silence stretch for a moment, watching the executives shift in their seats. It was no longer her being tested, it was them. And they knew it. With calm grace, she leaned forward. "I did hear your presentation," she began. "Your numbers are strong. Your growth is impressive. But what I observed before I even entered this room speaks louder than anything on these slides." The words landed heavy, and she could see the ripple of discomfort around the table. Some avoided her gaze, others leaned back, pretending to be unfazed. But the tension was undeniable. For the first time since she had arrived, the balance of power shifted completely. No one in that room could dismiss her now. No one could smirk, or doubt, or whisper. She had entered the boardroom underestimated, but she now sat as the most powerful person in it. And deep down, every executive at that table knew it. The receptionist may have told her to get lost, but in this moment, it was the company itself that stood at the edge of being lost to arrogance, lost to blindness, lost to the consequences of forgetting the simple rule that respect must come before everything else. The power had shifted, silently, without her ever raising her voice. And it would only grow stronger as she prepared to make her decision. The room was still. The executives leaned forward, pretending to be confident, but their eyes betrayed them. They knew the moment had come. Their future rested in the hands of the woman they had failed to recognize, the woman they had underestimated. The CEO sat quietly for a few seconds longer, her hands resting calmly on the table. She had learned long ago that silence could be more powerful than words. The longer she waited, the more nervous they became. A cough broke the tension at one corner of the table. Someone tapped a pen nervously. Another shifted in his chair as if it were suddenly too tight. The balance of power had already tilted, and she hadn't said more than a few sentences. Finally, she leaned forward, her eyes sweeping across the room. "I listened carefully to your presentation," she said softly. "Your charts are polished. Your growth is impressive, and your plans are ambitious. But there is one problem. A problem so serious, no numbers can hide it." The executives exchanged uneasy glances. She continued, her tone calm but piercing. "On my way in today, I was told by your receptionist to get lost." The words fell heavy, like stones dropped into water. A ripple of shock spread across the table, faces stiffened. Some executives' eyes widened. Others tried to mask their panic with forced neutrality. No one dared to interrupt her. "She didn't check the appointment list," the CEO said. "She didn't ask who I was. She didn't even show the basic courtesy every visitor deserves. She looked at me, made an assumption, and decided I didn't belong here." The silence in the room was deafening. A few executives now avoided her gaze completely. They knew there was no excuse for this. "And here's the truth," she continued, her voice still steady but sharper now. "That receptionist is not the only one guilty of this behavior. She is a reflection of your company culture. In the lobby, I saw people who looked exhausted and fearful. I saw arrogance in the way managers spoke to their juniors. I saw a workplace where respect is a rare commodity." She paused, letting her words cut through the air. Then she leaned back in her chair, her expression calm, almost compassionate. Do you know what that tells me? It tells me your success is built on fear, not respect. And fear doesn't last. Fear breaks companies from the inside out. The weight of her words pressed down on the boardroom. For the first time, the executives realized this wasn't just about one rude receptionist. It was about the soul of their entire company. One man tried to clear his throat and speak. With all due respect, ma'am, perhaps this was just a misunderstanding. We can address it. The CEO's eyes turned to him, calm but unwavering. A misunderstanding is when you forget someone's name. A misunderstanding is when you schedule the wrong time for a meeting. What happened to me today was not a misunderstanding, it was prejudice. It was arrogance. And it was culture. Don't try to reduce it to an accident. The man's face turned pale. He lowered his eyes and said nothing more. The CEO then straightened her posture, her voice firm but not raised. I came here today to decide if I should partner with your company. I came prepared to listen, to learn, and to give you a chance. But what I have learned in these walls is far more valuable than any numbers you could show me. I've learned that respect does not live here. And without respect, no partnership with me is possible. The words hit harder than any rejection letter. The executives froze. Some looked panicked. Others tried to mask their disappointment. But all of them understood what her decision meant. Without her investment, their biggest project would crumble. Without her partnership, their reputation in the market would take a devastating blow. She didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice. She simply delivered her decision with the dignity of someone who knew her worth. I will not be working with your company, she said. Not now, not in the future. My time, my resources, and my trust are too valuable to give to a place that cannot even offer the most basic respect to the people who walk through its doors. The silence was crushing. Some executives closed their laptops slowly, as if the weight of the moment had drained the life out of them. Others stared at the table, unable to meet her gaze. The CEO stood, gathering her handbag with quiet grace. She looked at them one last time and said, "Remember this. Numbers can rise and fall. Markets can change, but respect is the one thing that sustains a company. Without it, you will collapse. And you will only have yourselves to blame." With that, she turned and walked toward the doors, leaving behind a boardroom filled with people who finally understood the power they had just lost. The heavy boardroom doors closed behind her with a quiet thud, but inside the room, the silence exploded into chaos. The executives stared at each other, some whispering frantically, others sitting in stunned disbelief. The decision had been made. The partnership they had worked for months to secure had slipped out of their hands in just a few minutes. At first, they tried to reassure themselves. "It's just one deal," one muttered. "We'll find someone else." But deep down, they knew it wasn't just one deal. This wasn't an ordinary investor walking away. This was her, a CEO whose reputation carried weight across the entire industry. When she walked away from a company, others paid attention. And when she spoke, people listened. By the end of that week, the first cracks began to appear. News spread. Quietly at first, an investor who had been considering funding their next big project suddenly pulled back, citing concerns about company culture. Another potential client postponed a contract signing, saying they needed more time to review options. Within 2 weeks, 3 major deals were either canceled or delayed. Inside the office, panic grew. Executives held emergency meetings late into the night, trying to patch the damage. But no matter how many strategies they scribbled onto whiteboards, no matter how many desperate calls they made, the truth was clear. Their reputation was unraveling, and they couldn't stop it. Employees felt the shift too. Whispers filled the hallways. Rumors spread that the CEO who had visited, the one dismissed by their receptionist, had chosen to cut ties. Staff members, already demoralized, now feared layoffs were coming. Productivity dropped, and absenteeism rose. For the first time, managers who once barked orders with arrogance now walked the halls with worry in their eyes. Clients began asking questions. Is it true she pulled out? Why would she walk away? And though the executives tried to spin the story, the industry wasn't fooled. People had seen enough of the company's behavior to believe it. The truth was obvious. Their arrogance had caught up with them. Then came the moment that confirmed their downfall. At a high-profile conference, the CEO was asked during an interview why she had chosen not to partner with them. She didn't reveal details. She didn't even mention the receptionist. But her answer was enough. I do not invest in companies where respect is absent. Numbers mean nothing if people are not valued. That single sentence traveled across headlines, LinkedIn posts, and business newsletters within hours. Everyone knew who she was talking about, even without the name. And suddenly, the company that once prided itself on being untouchable became a cautionary tale. Stockholders grew nervous. Shares dipped. Senior leaders resigned quietly, hoping to escape before the ship sank completely. And all the while, the employees who had once been told to simply do their jobs were now watching their livelihoods crumble because their leaders had failed to build a culture of dignity and respect. The receptionist, the one who had told the CEO to get lost, heard the rumors too. At first she laughed them off, not realizing the gravity of what she had done. But as weeks passed and the company's decline grew visible, she began to understand. People avoided her in the break room. Some whispered behind her back. Eventually, her manager called her in not to fire her, but to scold her for causing a mess. Yet even that was proof of the company's brokenness. They weren't protecting her or helping her grow. They were simply looking for someone to blame. The collapse wasn't sudden, like a building falling in an instant. It was slow, steady, like a rope unraveling thread by thread. But it was just as deadly. What once looked like a powerful empire was now cracking from within. And all of it, every loss, every deal gone, every whisper of failure traced back to one quiet morning in the lobby when a receptionist, shaped by the arrogance of her workplace, told the wrong woman to get lost. Irony was bitter. The company had dismissed her, but now it was they who were being dismissed by investors, by partners, by clients, and soon, by history itself. The collapse had begun, and nothing could stop it. Months passed, and the company that once stood tall like a glass tower of pride was now reduced to whispers in the business world. Their name no longer commanded respect. It drew smirks, pity, and warnings. What had once been described as a rising empire was now spoken of as a reminder of what arrogance can do. The black CEO, meanwhile, continued her journey untouched by the chaos. Her company thrived, her influence grew stronger, and her story became something larger than a business deal. It became a lesson. She never went out of her way to shame the company. She didn't write angry letters or reveal every detail of what happened. She didn't need to. The truth carried itself. All she had done was stand in her dignity, make her decision, and speak a single line. I do not invest in companies where respect is absent. That sentence alone was enough to echo across industries. Young entrepreneurs repeated it in workshops. Business schools cited it in case studies. Employees in different organizations began using it in quiet conversations, reminding each other of what mattered most. Even leaders who had once dismissed the importance of culture now quoted her words in their meetings, desperate to avoid the same mistake. Her story traveled far beyond the walls of that failed company. It reached young professionals who often felt invisible, reminding them that their value wasn't defined by someone else's judgment. It inspired women, especially women of color, who had faced the same dismissive glances in lobbies and boardrooms. And it became a quiet warning to executives everywhere. Never underestimate anyone. Because respect is not optional, it is the foundation of everything. The receptionist, who had once told her to get lost, became part of the tale as well. Not as a villain, but as a symbol of what happens when arrogance and prejudice are allowed to grow unchecked in a workplace. She had been shaped by her environment, but her words had revealed the cracks that destroyed the empire. The CEO never blamed her personally. She understood it wasn't about one person, but about a culture. And that was the real point of the story. Looking back, the CEO often thought about that day, not with anger, but with gratitude. In a strange way, the receptionist had done her a favor. She had saved her from investing in a company that would eventually collapse anyway. She had shown her in just a few sentences everything she needed to know. The lesson was clear and unshakable. Respect cannot be faked. You can buy tall buildings, design glossy presentations, and wear the most expensive suits, but if respect is missing, everything else will fall apart. A company without respect is like a house built on sand. It may stand for a while, but the storm will always come. And so, her story lived on. It wasn't remembered as just a tale of one rude receptionist or one failed company. It was remembered as a story of resilience, dignity, and truth. A story of how one calm, composed woman reminded the world that leadership is not about appearances, titles, or money. It is about how you treat people, every person, from the boardroom to the front desk. In the end, the company was gone, but her words remained. They became a guiding light for those who wanted to build not just businesses, but legacies. And whenever people told the story, they always ended with the same lesson: respect everyone, because the person you dismiss today may be the very person who holds your future in their hands tomorrow.